In 1734, a group of runaway slaves defeated the greatest naval power on the planet. And when word got out, planters abandoned their plantations and fled Jamaica en masse. And slaves began to punk slave masters.
Man, fuck that white nigga.
For a brief moment, slavery almost ended in Jamaica. This is the incredible story you were never told about how the Maroons murdered the seamen. But first, smash my like button, subscribe, and share this video and hype it up to boost the algorithm. And don't forget to comment. The Maroons. The Jamaican Maroons are a group of people who resisted the Spanish and the British slave system in Jamaica. So called from the Taino word cimarron, which means wild or unruly, which may be related to the word marrano, meaning a pig. However, they call themselves Yenkunku, Pikibo, meaning children of the Most High God. They began with the native Tainos and the Caribs, along with the Portuguese Jews, known as Marranos, and Moors, referred to as Moriscos. They all fled slavery, resisted the Spanish expansion, and maintained various kingdoms in the mountains of Jamaica. They would later be joined by Africans who escaped slavery, the most prominent of them being Prince Nakwan and the 600 Akans. Nakwan would lead them against the Spaniards until the arrival of the British in 1655. Some Maroons, like Juan de Bolis, fought alongside the British, and others, like Juan de Ceres, fought for the Spanish, while Nakwan and the true Maroons stayed in the cut. With the help of Juan de Bolis of the Maroons, the British were able to defeat the Spaniards and take Jamaica. But this was only a portion of Jamaica. The Maroons still occupied the mountains, and the British wanted those lands. So in 1655, they declared war on the Maroons. What ensued was ass-whooping after ass-whooping, as the British failed repeatedly to defeat the Maroons. In fact, from 1655 all the way up to 1730, successive British governors, including Captain Morgan himself, tried and failed in battle after battle. Maroon unity. By the 1700s, leadership of the Maroons went from Nakwan to his children, King Cudjoe and Queen Nanny of the Maroons, who were born free in the mountains of Jamaica. Cudjoe would ruthlessly consolidate the other Maroon tribes into one family, Kinda, to better fight the British. He then built Maroon towns across the island and put his siblings in charge of them. Cudjoe built his town on the west, and his brother Akumpong was stationed at Akumpong town, and left his sister in charge of their hometown in the east, which became known as Nannytown, which the British called the Great Negro Town, which is where our battle takes place. The Maroons in the east are known as the Windwards, and the Maroons in the west are known as Leeward. But this is an appellation given to them by the British, and it betrays the actual unity that existed between the two. They did not separate until much later into the Maroon. Additionally, Cudjoe was said to have traveled between east and west a few times a year to keep themselves prepared for an invasion, so there was regular communication and a headship over all the Maroon towns. So despite what history books say that this was a battle between the Windwards and the Leewards that are not involved, that's nonsense. All Maroons were on deck for this battle. The Seamen. On July 6, 1733, after the defeat of the Large Grand Party, the House of Assembly wrote to Sir Charles Ogle, the Navy commander, requesting the assistance of his men. The Navy station in Port Royal, Kingston, would send 400 men to assist the cause. The plan was to have the 400 seamen backed by two independent companies, one comprised of about 200 soldiers, commanded by Lieutenant Thomas Elaine and marched by way of Hobby's estate. The second was comprised of about 200 militiamen, black and white, commanded by Sambo, marching by way of Abraham's Mountain. All three groups would be supported by 150 baggage Negroes. A popular story from this time is that Cudjoe and Accompong heard through the Slave Information Network about the seamen stationed in Port Royal. So they dressed in slave attire and managed to end up working for Sir Charlano Ogle. At some point, while loading or unloading his stuff from one of his ships, they absconded with a few of his military outfits. According to Maroon oral history, Accompong was known for wearing a black military uniform with gold gilt buttons. And when we look up British Navy uniforms at that time, that 100% checks out. That was indeed one of the outfits that they wore at that time. And to this day, Accompong's ghost can be seen wearing this uniform in Accompong Town. Maroon plans. The Maroons also maintained a network with the enslaved class that they could find out what was going on in the plantation, and even in the governor's mansion through their connections with slaves loyal to the Maroons. But Cudjoe, along with Kwashi, would also often dress up as slaves and go down to the plantations in Port Antonio for espionage. This is how the Maroons found out about the coming of the seamen months in advance. Having a network of slaves around the governor, including himself, he knew exactly what they had planned. The Maroons were well armed for this invasion, so much so that some Maroons went into battle with 3 guns. A Maroon named Scipio is said to have ordered the Maroons of Nanny to divide into 3 groups and to set up ambush points at each approaches to the town. Group A consisted of less than 100 warriors who established an ambush on the route of Hobby's estate. A captured Maroon named Cyrus revealed to the British that they hid an ambush located at a ridge at the back of the plantain wall. Group B was stationed on Two Claw Ridge, not an unusual ambush spot, but near a flat area 2 miles above Stony River. Group C consisted also of about 100 warriors stationed on Abraham Mountain, or Carrion Crow Hill, in the Blue Mountains, where Sambo was coming. Due to some confusion, the parties ended up marching in 2 companies instead of 3 to the Maroon village. One group got delayed and another ended up arriving a day earlier than expected, but were still decimated. But them still get them backside clapped by Maroon. When the others arrived, they were ambushed. One of the Swarton brothers was shot during the pandemonium. So they began to retreat and scatter, and on the retreat they decided to destroy the resources such as ammunition and gunpowder. Maroon version. According to the Maroon version of the story, the seamen showed up in the early hours of the morning at the bottom of a hill, and the ship took off and said he was going to come back the next day or 3 days later or something. But the soldiers barely made it up the mountain because the Maroons rained down bullets, arrows, and spears on them. The terrain was such that the Maroons had the high ground and were hidden and could see them, but could not be seen. It was like shooting fish in a barrel or seamen in a valley, and that place became known as Seamen's Valley, cause I saw all the seamen them dead. Post-battle. Historians argue that the British diminished the significance of this battle by underreporting the amount of seamen and troops sent to fight the Maroons. And documents about what exactly happened and casualties are surprisingly missing, only that people retreated and abandoned ammunition. But that year was reported that there was significantly more burials than any other year, and the fallout of the defeat of the seamen points to the Maroon version of the story being the most likely version, and the name Seaman's Valley seems to support this idea. The seamen were said to be battle-hardened and willing to fight to the last man, and indeed they did. The defeat
of the Seamen echoed throughout Jamaica and back to England, and its consequences were immediately felt. How a small band of formerly enslaved blacks defeated the greatest naval empire was nothing short of miraculous, that it spawned many stories of the Maroons having supernatural powers. It so terrified the planters that many whites fled Jamaica en masse. This had severe consequences on the British economy because many planters abandoned their plantation, which halted sugar production. This was the cornerstone of the British economy at the time. Additionally, the defeat of the Seamen halted productivity on the plantations as slaves became emboldened, threatening their masters with calling the Maroons on them. This was documented quite frequently throughout the island.
You hear his brigade and cuss that cracker's head clean off. I'm out of here. You ain't never seen no nigga be gone like I'ma be gone. Taste.
At this point, many slaves began to run away and join the Maroons, but many more chose to stay and exploit their newfound freedom on the plantation. This would prove to be a crucial error on the part of the enslaved class in Jamaica, because this gave the British time to recoup and resume the war. Prior to resuming the war, the British had been considering a peace treaty after the defeat of the Seamen. Conclusion. The defeat of the Seamen is the greatest story of black resistance you were never told. And in the end, the British not only hid the story, but what they did tell us, they underreported. But since they won't tell, this video will. And if you see any videos online about the Maroons versus the Seamen, just know they got it from here first. From a Maroon. Maroon la, hold on. Maroon la, hold on. La, hold on. Maroon la, hold on. You don't know. Smash my like button, leave your thoughts in the comment section. Till next time. And if you like this video, hit up that super thanks button or the Cash App and subscribe to my Patreon. Till next time.